What were typical meals like? Was there meat with every meal in the early days?
My goodness, no. Of course, I was only 1 year old when my parents came, so I don't remember those very early meals, but I can't imagine um, them having meat very often at all in those days. But the best time of the year for meat was right at hog killing time, and you had fresh meat. And then once it was all prepared on hog killing day, and the next day it was prepared for long term keeping.
Did they do that as a community? Neighbors helping neighbors during hog killing time?
Sometimes, I think in those very early days, they did have uh, some community hogs. There were some people, some men were much more skillful at hog killing than others. I guess everybody had to learn in the long run, but that was one process where they put um, basically salt and sugar and maybe some spices. They mixed it together and then rubbed the fresh meat with it, and they put it. That's why we have a smokehouse, and they would hang the hams and hang the slabs of bacon, make a fire in the floor of the smokehouse. Not a big fire, but a smoking fire. So I guess they used fresh cut wood for that because it smokes more. And I think they used hickory chips. They would use an axe and cut off little chips and put that on the fire. And I can remember having to go and check on the fire and see if it were still smoking good. And that gave extra flavor to the meat.
Was it just for flavor, or was there a preservative factor in the smoke?
I'd say it had both preservative. It helped to, of course, the heat helped to dry out the very fresh meat, and it would keep from one season to the next. And that was usually hog killing day was usually the first really cold snap that you had in the fall.
So were the hogs running loose? I mean, this was open range during that time.
They were allowed to run most of the year free. You had to fence them out of your garden and your crops. But if you were fattening them, I mean, if you wanted to kill them, then you did put them up and feed them everything you get your hands on to feed them and make them fat for killing.
What other meats did you have?
I don't remember us having beef, goodness, till a long time after the first days. I know that Daddy was a hunter. I know that he loved to kill rabbits and squirrels and uh, grouse and quail, and that was a real treat when we had those. Not all kinds at one time. One squirrel would feed uh, a family. Sometimes they would be tough and they had to be boiled, and sometimes they were young and tender and really delicious. And my mom fried them just like she did fried chicken, and we loved it.
Did you have chickens?
We always have chickens. Uh, that way we always had eggs, and it was usually a special occasion when we had fried chicken, and then usually for Christmas I think we had some ham, but my mom never cooked a whole ham like now we cook a whole ham for Christmas. Never did we do that.
What other food staples did she keep? Um, as far as what came out of the garden, or just was it seasonal? Or
Well, a lot of it was seasonal, and we bought flour in 25-pound bags, and the bags were important staples for dish rags and curtains and pillowcases and all kinds of uses that they could have throughout the house. And Dad always saved corn, the best ears of corn, big white ears of corn, and we shelled them, and he took it to the mill and got it ground, and so we always had meal. And if we had too much meal or flour, we always had empty lard cans, and we put the extra in that so that it would stay fresh. We always had a lard can full of lard that had been rendered out from the fat of the pig. So, and Mom always had baking powder, and she always had soda and salt. And I think Daddy bought salt in 25-pound bags also, and used it all year, especially when it came the hog killing time too. And she always had cocoa, and the big can of cocoa, Mother's cocoa, that's up at the museum, is the size of cocoa boxes that they bought then. They used a lot of it. And one of the things that I've heard a lot of homestead kids, second generation kids, say that one of their favorite dishes was chocolate gravy, which their mamas always made for them.
what about you talking about the flour sacks, and the uses that they were used, and we do have several on display at both the house and the Tower museums. How much of the clothing was made from the flour sacks?
Lots of clothing and household goods were made from flour sacks, salt sacks, and feed sacks that you bought feed back then for the cows, and I guess for the horses too. And some of it was printed, some of it was white. My mom had sheets made from feed sacks. The flour sacks were thinner, and so they were used mainly for dish towels and underclothes for small kids. Because back then, the sewing machine was a very vital part of the household, because most of the clothes were made by the wife or an older daughter, or whoever, an adult who might be living there. But women learned to sew. They used whatever they had. They used certainly feed sacks for quilts, to line quilts, and to make the tops with.
Today we display our quilts so proudly. Was that common practice back in the early days to display the quilts?
Not at our house, and I don't think it was so much as it is today. All the quilts at our house were utilitarian. They were thankful to have them to keep us warm in the wintertime. So they were usually on the bed, and my mom was always very conscientious to have the tops of her beds covered if she didn't have a bedspread, which a lot of people at that time called counterpanes. She would just spread a sheet over the top, and particularly in the summertime when you didn't need much cover, she would keep a sheet over the top of the bed just so it looked nice and clean.
When the first families came, there were different ages of kids that came on board to the homesteads in the early days. some were young like you, and some were born there like your brother and sister. But there were also families that had older children when they came. And I would like for you to show us an example of some of the shoes that from that period that show the condition of the hardships that they were enduring before they came to the homesteads.
A lot of people did have it really hard at that particular time in history, um, and this shoe is just absolutely worn out. You can see that this is the original sole, this is the second sole, this is the third sole, this is the fourth sole that's been put on here. It's been nailed on, and the heels are just worn off. You can see there's a hole all the way through, worn here. And this one shows where it was totally worn off the bottom, been resoled several times, and newspaper folded up and put inside so that the nails didn't hurt the feet, or in this part where there wasn't any sole, they could still wear it, and if they kept their foot down, maybe nobody would know. But a lot of families were really hurting before they came to the homesteads. It's hard for us to imagine that people could and would wear shoes in this shape, but some of them didn't even have a pair of shoes.
I've heard where people would get a new pair of shoes every year, or strive to get a new pair of shoes for the children every year. Was that something you think most of the homesteaders could do before they came to the homesteads?
Probably not before they came. I would think.
Do you think that much wear on a pair of leather shoes would have been done by a single child?
Probably not. Probably not. I don't believe, with all the scuffing that a kid can do, I don't believe that could have been worn off in 1 year.
Did they wear the shoes all the time?
No, they didn't.
When would they have worn them?
When they dressed up, or in cold weather.
But as far as summertime?
Summertime, go barefooted I can remember kids taking off their shoes in March at school when it was still cold, but just anxious to get out and run, and then their feet would get really hard, and I imagine those tough feet, when they put the shoes on in the wintertime that had nails in them like these do, they could stand that a lot better than we could today, because there's no way we could walk with shoes with nails in them like that.
Try to get a close-up of them a little bit. Can you show them again?
That's just totally worn off. So that child was, and this is worn off more here than it is over here. So this child was not walking straight. He was walking like that. But this one is this just unbelievably. And I think it's interesting to note the number of knots that are in the shoestrings, and you can see they're just totally worn out, and probably before they stopped wearing them, there weren't any strings any higher than that. I don't know. I would think probably a kid most of the time, even in the wintertime, would have rather gone without shoes as to wear that.